Guess I wanted to talk about what it means to be a craftsman versus what it means to be a worker. And this is relevant to H-1B visa and the commuter industry in general and the collapse of it, which happened a long time ago, by the way. Long time. The, you know, software quality is down. I've talked about this before. Jonathan Blow talked about this in the collapse of civilization, something like that. Good videos. He's talked about it multiple places. The reason for this is because the industry has gone stale. The idea of craftsmanship is not in our society anymore. We don't understand what that means. If you think that you can take someone and put them through a boot camp or even a college degree and turn them into a craftsman, you don't understand anything about the world worth understanding. I mean that technically, and I can prove it. I'm not going to do that here. This is just so I can rant. Some people can't do some things. Everybody kind of knows this, everybody kind of agrees to this, but it's really not a strong enough statement to be useful. Most people can't do most things, just flat out, and will never be able to ever, no matter what else changes. Like they have been born with a level of inability that is insurmountable. It just is what it is. I'm never going to be able to play guitar at all, much less well. I don't know why. I've been trying for years. Uh, there might be some very good technical reasons, like I don't, I can't really do rote, repetitive stuff for too long. Right, I can do it for quite a while, but eventually, I, you know, a year of practicing guitar sounds like 3 eternities to me. But there are just some basic level of not getting it. That means that even if I didn't have that or could get around that problem, I'm not going to be able to play guitar. It's just not going to happen. And the number of things that are like that, I mean, I don't know all the things that are in the world that could be done. So I don't know all the things that are in the world that I will never be able to do no matter what changes. I don't know. And neither do you. A worker is somebody following a procedure to get a very specific result. This works fantastically well for making cheap cars, as Henry Ford showed the world. It actually works fantastically well in science in the laboratory. Right? Somebody comes up with a procedure, they can have other people follow that procedure and replicate it, bang. Now, that was invention. Like, if you want the greatest scientist of all time in terms of scientific method, it's Thomas Edison. That flat out. It's not like he, except for one or two ideas, it's not like he came up with these ideas and then implemented them. For the most part, like with the light bulb, the idea was already known. He just found out how to implement it correctly through the repetitive scientific process and hiring lots and lots of people to go through that process over and over again. Set of procedures, right? Build the bulb this way. Try this filament. Try that filament. Try that filament. Try that filament, right? And then there's another group of people making filaments, right? So breaking things down procedurally into that process, that's what workers do, right? They're part of that process. They don't develop the process. I'm not saying you can't do both. Of course, it would be a waste to do both in many cases, not all, right? But they don't do both. This is why there's a huge gap. And if you read white papers at all, not that I suggest that you do, but you can, there's a huge gap in what can be done, say, in a lab at MIT or any one of other of these schools, and what can be done at scale, right? not even necessarily cheaply, almost always cheaply, but not necessarily. There's a bunch of processes out there that give us better electrical conductivity on wires that would actually make sense to jump on, or give us faster processors that are actually cheaper to build in a lab, right? But they can't do it at scale. They can't do enough of it quickly enough to make a difference. And so the fact that it's actually not all that expensive doesn't really help you, because price isn't everything, right? And so that's the realm of the worker. The realm of the craftsman may seem to involve procedures or processes, and there are certainly some processes involved, but they know when and how to deviate from those processes, how to improve them. They don't have to come up with the process. This is a weird middle ground. They can take somebody else's process and adjust it to them and adjust it to what they're doing, right? Maybe piece by piece or moment by moment, depending upon how you look at it, to make it better than the worker. So maybe they're not inventing new things, right? New processes, that they're not the super pioneers, right? They're not the out there researcher types, right? They're not the innovators. They're not the inventors necessarily. Maybe they do a little bit of that, but they're also not workers. They're not just following the thing to put the car together so that you have good, consistent cars, which is what you need. A craftsman hand builds and custom builds things based on the needs of the customer. Now, that doesn't mean they don't build a bunch of things that look almost identical. They may, but they're not identical. They're crafted. They're not built by machines. Machines cannot craft. Only humans can craft. So there's this interesting middle ground. So who gets squeezed out with automation? Never craftsmen. Never. Ever. Ever, ever. Now, some crafts go away as the result of machines, right? But craftsmen just go to new crafts or switch how they're applying their craft. So you get mass-produced beds. Maybe a craftsman isn't building beds anymore, right? That happens. Also, I know a craftsman who builds beds. Still there. They're very expensive beds, by the way, but people buy them because craftsmanship is more valuable than the mechanical, procedural, worker-built stuff. And I've hinted at this, right, a couple times. There's a third set, if you will, or class. It's another way to think about it, because it's a class, right, of people that are coming up with new stuff. Most of the stuff that people that come up with is complete, utter garbage for various different reasons, right? Sometimes it's garbage because it can't be implemented at scale. Sometimes it's garbage because it's just too damned expensive, even though it's possible, right? Most often it's garbage because no one needs it, because innovative people come up with a lot of innovations, and innovation is a very tricky thing. If you want to be a craftsman at something, you can't just grab on to the processes and procedures of the thing. And maybe some people can, because they can sort of self-generate, right? But most people will not do that. The way you want to become a craftsman is to understand the principles behind things, what the constraints are, and when you can violate those constraints or bend the rules, right? And then you get the patterns that are in there, and now you can move with the patterns to create something that a worker would never create. The way you do this in software, in my opinion, and Dave Bombal just did an interview 2-3 days ago, 100 courses, but it's an interview, so I don't His naming is strange. Um, and I like most of the stuff on his channel, but I don't watch it that often. Somebody else pointed me at this. Thank you, Bruce. Um, and it was a good interview. I disagree with the guy on a few things, and this is part of why this came up. If you want to become a craftsman in the computer field, you need to understand certain principles. And while I can agree that you should never build your own operating system, fair, I do not do that. Sure. I disagree that you shouldn't get together with a bunch of people and be responsible for one part of an operating system. The thing I very much think you have to do to be a craftsman at programming is to know how to write a compiler in C. Alan Holub has a great book on this called Compiler Design in C. I have that book somewhere. I think it's in the shed. It's not out here. Unfortunate. Not all my computer books are on my shelf right now. The Dragon book is impenetrable. You know, I mean, a few people get it or got it, obviously. But that book is much better. There are probably other books that are, we'll say, equally as good. I would not try to code a compiler in any other language. And the thing is, you need an iterative approach to understand the way a craftsman does. In other words, you need to do it the wrong way first, right? And you need to do it another wrong way second. And you need to do it another wrong way third. None of those ways don't work. It's just that they're wrong, and they're wrong for reasons. And once you understand those reasons, if you can do that, and maybe you can't, and that's okay. Maybe you're no good at the craft of programming, and you're good at another craft, or maybe you're just not a craftsman of any kind ever. And that's okay too. Like, the world doesn't work without workers. Someone's got to keep the stuff working. Those are the workers. Someone's got to craft the unique and important customized stuff. Those are craftsmen. Someone's got to invent everything. Those are innovators. It doesn't matter which of those categories you fall in. You won't fall in all three. That's okay too. And you're probably not an innovator because those are extremely rare. And if you were, you'd know it. You could be a craftsman though. I don't know. That's much harder to determine. You should understand that craftsmanship takes time, a lot of time, a lot of learning, because you don't learn by blowing through it as quick as you can to get to the end. Then you will never be a craftsman in anything if you do that, ever. It just sucks because it takes years. And it's always the case that people look back and, oh man, if only I had known. Bleh. Now, wise people don't do that. They go, well, duh. Couldn't have known that because it takes time. You got to integrate your experience, and so you can't rush your experience. You're going to be a craftsman? Don't rush your experience. There was a Twitter post that had a C bug, and it said, see if you can spot the bug. And I think it was 12 lines of C code. I went, I can't spot the bug. What the hell's wrong with me today? And then I popped on one of the computers and fired up a C compiler and typed the code in by hand. The right way to do it, by the way. All other ways are completely invalid. You cannot learn code by reading it. I'm sorry. That's never going to work. Once you've learned code, reading it can be helpful, but you really got to type in code. And make all the typos and everything else. You get used to how much you suck. It really helps to know how much you suck. And I compiled the code, and I didn't believe the output because I couldn't find the bug right away. So I said, this could be a punk. This guy could be screwing with me, and this is perfectly working code. I don't believe it. It was not working code. It was one of these sneaky little errors, the kind I used to specialize in. So I felt stupid. I was like, why didn't I see that? This is the sort of thing you would find in, this is the sort of thing you train for by reading Obfuscated Sea and Other Mysteries, which is another book that I have that is also in the shed somewhere. Great book, by the way. Great book. Oh, what a great book. really teaches you how how many problems the C compiler had, especially back in the day. Um, and they're just holes in the C specification, right? A bunch of stuff is, well, no one would ever type that, but you can, and it compiles. And it's a bunch of stuff you can type that compiles that doesn't do what it looks like it does because it's not immediately obvious what the error is. Yeah, all you have to do is move the semicolon to a different line. Oh, I should have caught that. I totally should have caught that. Craftsmanship requires effort, and you're not innovating, and you're not working. And maybe you can't be a craftsman or an innovator, and that's okay. But you should figure that out quickly. You have the patience to become a craftsman? Because if you have the aptitude and the intelligence and the time, but you don't have the patience, you don't take the time, it's not going to happen. And we all have limitations. That might be your only limitation, but it might be one you can't overcome. There's lots of limitations I can't overcome for guitar. It took me decades to figure that out. Why I don't have a guitar anymore. I used to, right? I used to blame all kinds of things. Why can't I learn this guitar, right? But there's so many reasons why that it was just never going to happen. Look for the innovators versus the craftsmen versus the workers and learn from whatever you can find out there. But don't believe that just because you learn something from them or learn things that you can become that thing. That's really not how it works. Anyway, I just thought it was important to get that off my chest. And hopefully you found it helpful too. If not, then that sucks.